Welcome to Beyond Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petralis, and we are so excited for today's guest. This is my first volleyball coach that I've had on the podcast, and what a coach to have on. The resume of this coach and what this coach has accomplished, both from an individual standpoint, but obviously team accomplishments, has just been absolutely tremendous. I'm honored to have on my first volleyball coach, but probably one that is going to be tough to top for sure. So I'm just going to read off a few of these coaches' accolades and introduce. So the current head men's and women's coach at Rivier University, also the founder of CCK Performance Training, and we'll be talking about that a little later on in the podcast. The associate athletic director also at Rivier University, the first coach in NCAA history to have 400 victories as both the men's coach and a women's coach. Unbelievable. It was inducted into the Northeast Collegiate Volleyball Association Hall of Fame in 2011. And was the American Volleyball Coaches Association Division III Coach of the Year in 2006. And we're talking across the nation, not just locally Division III. We're talking about across the country. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Craig Kolek.
Hey, man. Thanks for that intro. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I've said it to guests before. I'm just here to report the facts, and that's it. And those are the facts. So we're honored to have you on here today on this podcast. And, I usually introduce and jump right into it with coaches and just talk a little bit about how you got started in the sport of volleyball, as a player, as a coach, so on and so forth. I mean, really just how did you get so involved in the world of volleyball?
Sure. So I started playing beach volleyball when I was 21, just kind of hacking around with friends, family, and stuff. And then just kind of a good friend of mine and myself just started playing in some 2-on-2 tournaments on the beach. Did okay. And then we kind of talked about it a little bit and thought that we might be able to make a push to see if we can go try to play pro, follow the pro dream a little bit. So we tried chasing that. For about 7 years, we traveled the nation, played against some of the top players in the nation in beach volleyball. So that's kind of where I get the love of the game. And then I had an opportunity. I started coaching some high school, but really jumped right into the college game when I was 27 and kind of took off from there. I just love coaching. I love being with the players, and I love when they have that aha moment, when we're teaching and they really figure it out. As a coach, that's kind of the driving force to, something good happening once that happens. So that's kind of where my start was.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's just, there's something about being a coach and just motivating and getting the best out of your players, both mentally and physically. It's unbelievable. So you mentioned you jumped into the college world, right? And you jumped into the men's college world first. And I think you were 23 years, 24 years, somewhere in that window of coaching at Rivier University. But my question to you is, then maybe 3 years after starting coaching the men's job, you decided to make the plunge into also becoming the head girls volleyball, the head women's volleyball coach at Rivier University as well. So, I mean, I know the women's sport itself is the fall and the men's is in the winter, but I mean, talk about juggling two varsity collegiate Division III sports. I mean, it must be nonstop for you.
Yeah, it's definitely a grind. I mean, it's nonstop throughout the year between recruiting for both teams and really, trying to provide as much value as possible for both my teams and getting them to the level that we want to get them to and not be average and really get them to push. It's 365 days a year.
Yeah. And so, when you make that plunge or something, what made you say, like, after coaching men's, that, hey, I think I could balance coaching the ladies team as well? I mean, talk about that decision-making, that process a little bit.
I wouldn't be lying to you if I didn't tell you it was going to be a full-time job and benefits. So that was definitely a big push. I mean, I had an opportunity to go from coaching part-time a men's position to being full-time athletic staff member, and really being part of student athletes' lives for every day during their career. So that was a big part of it. But I mean, I love coaching. I know, my guys program was starting to build a little bit. The women's program was struggling. But I knew that, what I had to offer would really empower the women's team as well. And I couldn't pass up a full-time volleyball position in athletics. Like, there's not many of them out there. It was a great transition from being a player myself to being able to give back to the sport, give back to the student athletes that come to Rivier and play for me.
Yeah, oh man, if I have the opportunity to coach football full time with benefits and everything, oh my
Yeah.
God, I would do it yesterday. I would do it yesterday.
The game
S-
changer.
yeah, that for sure. So I'm gonna first talk about. I'm gonna split. I mean, we could do a podcast, literally one on your women's career and one on your men's career, but we're gonna try to cram this all in here. So I'm gonna start with the women's career, and I'm just gonna read off a few little facts that I researched about the team and some individual accolades of yours as well, and then I'll just ask you a few questions in general about the women's game.
Sure.
Let's start here. So we have coaching accomplishes, the 4-time Great Northeast Atlantic Conference. That's a conference you guys play in. 03, 2010, 2012, 2015. New Hampshire Coach of the Year in 2007. Team accomplishments. Currently, your win-loss record since taking over the program, 469 and 204. Your conference record of 201 and 40. Wow. Six great Northeast Atlantic Conference championships, 03, 07, 08, 11, 13, and 14. And you had 13 appearances. So, I mean, for all intents and purposes, you've, since starting there, have been in 65% of the championship games there, some number like that.
Yeah.
3 All-Americans, 3 Defensive Players of the Year, 26 tournament team selections, 5 conference tournament MVPs, and 6 NCAA appearances. I mean, I cut some stuff off that list because I could have kept going. But, I mean, when you hear that, I mean, talk about just what overcomes you when you listen to those type of accomplishments.
Yeah, you as you go through it daily, you really don't look at the big picture like that. So to hear it kind of all summarized like that, it's cool. It's pretty cool to hear. It's a little bit overwhelming to think that I've been coaching that long and have gone through so many years of that grind. But hearing the numbers and there's a reason for it, and obviously it was well worth the ride.
Yeah, and what's amazing to me, I just want to highlight a few of these teams. So in 03, you won your first conference championship.
Yeah.
Now, in that year, like dating back to when you started, that is your first recruiting class that became seniors when you won your first conference championship, which is impressive. But the more impressive question that I have for you is you won it with 8 total players on the team, 8. And I know the game of volleyball is at least 6 on the court and maybe, I don't know, another 6 or 7 on the bench. I mean, talk about winning a league, and going the NCAAs for all intents and purposes, then you clinch, right, with 8 members of a team, and maybe talk about that team a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that was my first championship for the women's team. To date, we have 17 on our roster, so 8 is definitely a low number. The cool thing about that team was that all 8 players were utilized, and all 8 players were really had some really good skills. So everybody had a part, everybody had a role, and we were obviously able to avoid some injuries to make it through the year. We actually went into the playoffs as the 2nd seed, so we won on the road on the championship game. We had a talented group. We had 4 really good seniors that were pivotal players, a setter, a middle, and 2 outsides. And then, our right side, our other middle and our libero and our DS they came in, they did their role, they did it well. And we had a great year from it. Would never have expected it as far as looking back and saying, okay, 8 players, pretty hard to do, pretty hard to manage practices. But they worked hard. They were a great group. I mean, the 4 seniors I feel great about because they went through the whole process. One of them was a transfer. She came in as a sophomore, but the other 3, they were recruited. My first recruiting class. They stuck with me. I was learning as well back then, so the numbers, that probably the reason why the numbers were low on that team was because I was probably taking some beatings on recruiting trail, and trying exactly to see what was going to fit for Rivier. So it worked out, and I remember it to this day. I can remember the championship. I can remember exactly what happened on game point. I can remember the celebration, and I know what they went through for the whole year to be able to get to that point. So that was pretty awesome.
I mean, it's unreal. You remember 17 years ago, here you are remembering every little detail that is. It just shows the connection that you have with your team, your program, your players. And you mentioned recruiting. I love the listening and talking about the recruiting aspect of any sport.
Yeah.
So talk about recruiting in the ladies game. What I've seen is just my coaching career at the high schools that I've coached at is that typically some really good volleyball players are typically very good basketball players too. And a lot of times you're trying to recruit and they're not sure which sport they want to play. So I guess just how do you recruit in general? Or if you have an athlete that's like that, a basketball player or a volleyball player, I mean, how do you convince them that Rivier is the right place for them?
Well, the cool thing about Division III, right, is that we encourage playing two sports. So that's always a good start. But my programs, we've had players that have come in that have tried to do both, and it's not that it wasn't manageable, but for some reason they ended up sticking with volleyball and maybe didn't finish their career at basketball at Rivier. And a lot of the players that I recruit are exactly what you said. They were basketball players, and they make a decision that volleyball was either more of a passion for them or just seemed like a better fit for them going to college, and they stopped playing basketball either at an earlier age or right after their senior year in high school. So we don't have a lot of crossover over players. But for me, what I look for in a lot of the players, and I tell them this to this day, is everybody has skill. Everybody brings something as far as that quality. I look at what they do after mistakes. I look at how they rebound themselves, and I look at what they do after a teammate makes a mistake. So if they're empowering their teammate and they're really trying to get them going and being positive with them, they're my type of player. If they are rolling their eyes, not going for support after a teammate makes a mistake, I tell them, like, I'm not interested. It's pretty easy unless we have a long conversation and they feel like they can make a change to it, but generally that does not work out for us. So that's kind of that's really a driving factor. I can teach any skill, any level for a player that wants to work hard at it. So that's kind of okay, you have athleticism, you play volleyball, awesome. How are you as a teammate? And if that works out, then I'll take them to the next level.
And that's great. I mean, I find in any sport, no matter what, I mean, those are some of the core, values of a lot of coaches, but to kind of just be upfront and honest, nowadays you see that a lot more. I see that in the high school game a lot more. And, that's a skill that sometimes is undercoached by a coach, I think, is just that mental support and that, that camaraderie, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
for their teammates. And just one last thing to wrap up the girls game before we jump into your men's career. What I found really impressive, besides 03, when you won, the conference and you won GNAC Coach of the Year, the other times you won it, you didn't win the league. In 2010, 2012, 2015, is that correct? That you didn't win the league? I mean, that's kind of cool to be Coach of the Year and not necessarily winning your league that year.
Yeah, it's there's always one game probably during those seasons that we didn't perform well or just got beaten during the regular season. But we were able to rebound and come back and win on the road. And I was thinking about this earlier. I'm trying to figure out what was more. All the victories are great and all the championships are great, but what's more fulfilling, winning on the road or winning at home? And they all have their special qualities, but I can tell you that I remember every single championship we won on the road. And they really stand out. So, yeah, I mean, it's not how you start, right? It's how you finish the season, and so you learn from mistakes. You figure out what need to do better and how we need to perform at that situation, and we make those adjustments.
Awesome. So I'm going to jump into your men's career here a little bit. And again, this is another heavily bullet pointed note of mine.
Okay.
So again, the AVCA Division III National Coach of the Year, which we mentioned in the intro. You were the 2-time New England Coaches Volleyball Association New England Coach of the Year. You were 4 times the New England Coaches Volleyball Association Coach of the Year, 5-time GNAC Coach of the Year. You were in the New England Collegiate Volleyball Hall of Fame in 2015. 2015 with the Rivier team that was also inducted in 2006. Here are the team accomplishments. 517 and 244, second most wins in Division III NCAA history. Top 15 national ranking for 14 consecutive years from 01 to 14, and then most recently in 2019. You were number one overall ranking in Division III, February 11, 2014. 14 All-Americans, 10 conference tournament MVPs, 3 NCAA Elite 8 appearances, 2 NCAA Final Four appearances, and 9 GNAC championships. I mean, again, I'm going to ask you the same question when you just hear all that stuff at once.
Yeah, it almost makes me laugh. It's overwhelming. The only thing that goes through my head really is that every single player that played for us, and I know how much they sacrificed and how much it meant to them to be the best they could be. So being able to work with those student athletes, that's the reason why we can name off those numbers.
So a question I have, because there's so many awards that I name, but there's 2 specific things that I want to ask you a little bit about. And the first thing I'll ask you about is winning Division III Coach of the Year in 2006. I mean, for all intents and purposes, at the height of the game that you play at the Division III level, I mean, you won the highest coaching award there is across the nation. I mean, that's got to be one tremendous feeling, knowing the work and dedication that at that time, not only were you putting into the men's game, but also into the women's game. And then the other question I'll ask you is about your Hall of Fame induction. I mean, again, being inducted into any Hall of Fame, I don't care what Hall of Fame it is an honor in itself, but obviously being recognized for your greatness. I mean, I just want to give you the floor maybe to talk about those two awards a little bit more.
Yeah. The National Coach of the Year award was flooring. I remember I was in my office. Well, first of all, the way it goes is you find out that you made the Final Four for that. And so I was like, well, that's really cool. And really, wow, awesome. Like, didn't even think or register that I was going to be, a finalist or the National Coach of the Year. So when I got the phone call, I remember getting the phone call. I remember, mouth was open, said thank you, but I don't remember what else came out of my mouth from there. I think it was a bunch of rumblings, but I sat in my office for a few minutes and, just reflected a little bit over everything that I've done, personally. And I usually don't try to make it personal in what I do, but I know how much I sacrificed. I know how much I pushed my players to be as great as they possibly could. So for that, it was great. It was just a moment that I probably won't feel again, because it was the first time that's happened to me. But it still went right back to the players that I coached really made the difference and really was able to make a huge dent in the whole scene. And that National Coach of the Year was just a small thing that kind of came off of that. It was a really talented team. So that was for sure one of the highlights in my career. Yeah, like you said, being inducted in a Hall of Fame, any Hall of Fame, it's awesome to be thought about and awesome to be mentioned and awesome to be inducted. For that one, it was really cool because that whole NECVA, Northeast Collegiate Volleyball Association, that really ignited men's volleyball for Division III. So to be at that kind of early level of the development of Division III, that was satisfying. Being part of the decisions and being part of the support and being part of a team that was able to help grow the game from 60 teams when it first started to 120 now. It's that's probably what I remember most out of being inducted. We put a lot of work into it as a team. We also put a lot of work into it as an administrator to help grow it. So that was pretty neat.
Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable, right? So, and that's the thing. I think it's hard. Like, sometimes I have coaches on here and I'm just reading off all these individual accolades and they're just like, one, they're kind of like embarrassed about it. But two, like you said, you kind of absorb it all in, being like, wow, that is a lot of things I've been able to accomplish in a short time at that point. And then obviously, like you mentioned, the administrative side of it, you working at the university is a huge help in knowing what you need as far as a program goes to be able to be successful and to compete at that high level. So I mentioned that you guys had 3 Elite Eight appearances, 2 Final Four appearances. And obviously, listen, you win Coach of the Year in 2006. You're inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2011. You have a #1 overall ranking Division III in 2014. All of that stuff accumulated and combined. And you were top 15 for like 14 consecutive years. I mean, talk about that from a recruiting aspect. I mean, you have like weapons in your arsenal to go out there and really recruit. I mean, talk about how it maybe helped recruiting locally, but maybe how it also helped you recruiting maybe more nationally or more out of this area and region.
Yeah, locally, I mean, the name was out there. If you were a volleyball player in high school, in New England, you knew of Rivier. And so just to have the conversations with people, whether they came to Rivier or not, that was empowering for us. The national scene, and we've had a ton of players from all over the country because of what the alumni started back in 2001 when we won our first New England championship. We were in a conference with the NECFA conference. We were in a conference of 40 teams. So to win the NECFA tournament in 2006, that really put us on the map nationally. And the reason why I bring that up is we're a school of about 800 to 900 undergraduate students. So we now have that underdog persona. We were the smallest school in Division III to be ranked #1. We were the smallest school to get to the Final Four. So being able to build off of that and use that as a recruiting piece and being that underdog recruiting piece, you get the right person that likes that type of thing and that type of persona and that way of really embracing who you are. It helps bringing in recruits for sure with that mentality.
Yeah, and I just think it's unbelievable because in the sense of you guys being the smallest school out there, I was trying to research a lot of that actually to see what your size comparison was in some of these schools that consistently popped up. And yeah, you guys were like numbers wise were just much lower than most schools, which makes it even more impressive.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I got to ask you. So you're the only coach in NCAA history to have 400 wins recorded in the men's and women's volleyball. I saw the really cool picture on social media of you with that banner. I mean, again, another accomplishment I'm asking you about, but just talk about that specific accomplishment because you're one of one. I mean, you're the only one of its kind. And I just think that is so impressive.
The 400 Club, baby. It's a beautiful thing. We named that our own club. Our alumni named it, and we're the only ones in it. So, we're the only ones that are going to welcome people into it. So you don't really go out coaching and you really don't go out playing looking for numbers, looking for that type of number. It also means that you've been coaching for a long time. So there's a lot of gray hair or a lot of balding hair going on. But the payoff is that you eventually have these little milestones, so the fact that we were able to jump into an exclusive club as a school, as a university, and as alumni, and everybody that's involved, everybody is a member of that club for Rivier. It shows that we've done something right over the years consistently. And it shows that we've been consistent with our product, consistent with our way of teaching, consistent with our methodologies to really get the most out of our players. And we didn't necessarily have all of the stud athletes come in. They worked hard we've had guys that came in and weren't stars in high school and were All-Americans. So the players that came in had the work ethic, and we were able to put it together, combine it, and then, because of their hard work and because of what they did in the court, I'm able to say it's a 400 club that, all of us, all of our alumni are all a part of. So, again, to look back at it, it's a little, you kind of giggle a little, and you kind of like, it's really cool and it's overwhelming. But you also know how much was put into it by every single person that helped get to that point.
Yeah. I mean, you can make it up all you want, but like I said, there's nobody else, out there that really has that. And I think that that's an amazing accomplishment. That means whatever system that you have in place of how you recruit and how you evaluate and how you coach and how you educate, it's working. And it's working in both worlds. So, before you know it, you're going to be in the 500 club. You guys will be making another banner.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to say this name to you, okay? And his name is Patrick Dorwalski. And I might have said it wrong. Dorwalski.
Close
Coaches
enough.
at the Stevens Institute of Technology, has won 562 career wins, the most in NCAA history. We mentioned you were second place. You're
Yeah.
currently at 517 in the men's game, 469 in the girls' game, okay? My question to you is has this record been on your mind? And my second question is there a thought in your head to try to beat that record both in the men's world and the women's world?
So Patrick Patrick retired, just retired this past year.
All right, so he ain't moving. He's not
He ain't
moving.
He is now frozen. So phenomenal coach. He was one of he was the oldest coach as far as number of years coaching, and I was second. So with my 24, he was up to 27, 28. And when I first came in coaching, I remember some things that he told me as far as pointers he was really giving as far as a coach. So tremendous accomplishment for him. And I would be lying if I said that I knew exactly. I didn't know exactly where his numbers were. I know where it was at. But for me, it's about still leading our players to be the best they can be and to have character when they graduate and being tremendous leaders when they graduate. If we are able to accomplish that, then the records start to take care of themselves. So if I break that record, awesome. What's more important to me is that we've had 22 conference championships as far as the program is involved. And, we've had 22 championships in 46 seasons. So for me, I'll take that number all day over, an individual getting 572 or whatever that number might be. It would be cool. Just another thing. But it's still, at the end of the day, it's still about the players, and they're the ones that are in the driver's seat as far as they have to perform in the court, and they do that, we get to that number. So.
Yeah, and I just think, again, it's probably hard to sit here and pump yourself a little bit in chasing that. But I just, I want to do my homework on you because I just find it so fascinating that, the success that you had at both levels. And I really started digging into like Division I coaches, all-time coaches to kind of see where you were ranked amongst people. I mean, you have a chance to make some moves over the years. I don't know how long you plan on coaching for, or how long you plan on your career being, but with your consistency, you average about 22 wins a year in the men's game and about 20 wins in the women's game from doing my math statistically. So, depending on how long you decide to coach, if you keep that consistency up, you're going to move up there in some all-time rankings. So I think that's really, if you want me to punch the numbers for you after the podcast, I can most certainly show you where you're at.
Yeah, send me that spreadsheet that you have.
So, I know for you, and this is like a real question I want to jump into more with the teaching and the coaching of the game. A big part of what you do with your players is not only the physical training, but also the mental training that goes into a game. And I thought we had a great phone conversation earlier this week about that. And so I know that you had started your CCK mental or CCK performance, excuse me. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about that because, I follow you on all social media platforms and I really like the stuff that you put out there. And after talking to you, I was able to explain it to me a little bit more of what it is. So I'm going to read a testimonial from a parent who actually wrote to you on Facebook as, their daughter went through your program. And it said, Coach Kolek helped our daughter move from a place of hesitancy and insecurity to one of confidence, leadership, and great success. This ultimately earned her Great Northeast Atlantic Conference first team all-conference accolades. Craig has always told her to trust the process, and he helped her believe in it in herself. We highly recommend CCK mental performance training. And I won't say who they are, but they're that's out there. So, I mean, talk about when you hear something like that, and obviously jump into what it is that you do with athletes outside the game a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that, and I know exactly, obviously, who that was from, and to think where she started as a freshman and what she became by a senior, on and off the court, had a lot to do with her work ethic and had even more to do with her being able to control her mind. And I'm a big believer that mental performance is a huge component of reaching peak performance. We talked about, I think there's three, what I found, there's three factors to peak performance. There's the skill training. So you have the coaches out there that teach the skill. You're beating on your craft every day, whatever skill it is, to get better at that. And then you have conditioning. You have physical conditioning to become a bigger, faster, stronger athlete for your sport. The third component is mental performance training. You can't have 2 out of the 3 if you're looking to reach your peak performance. And most times what gets overlooked is the mental performance part. Everybody goes skill, which is the usual route, and then you got to hit the weight room and get stronger, but nobody thinks about the mental performance as far as handling pressure. And I think these days athletes, the more they train at a younger age, the more they're under pressure, and nobody's teaching them how to deal with pressure. So, what happens when you have pressure and you can't handle it? You become nervous. You have a little bit of self-doubt. You don't perform to the level that you know that you can perform. And then you probably stop having fun, and you're just making mistakes repeatedly and you can't get out of it. And the fun is the huge aspect of it. So for me, the mental performance, I started training it back in 2004 with that 2016, and went to the Final Four and went into the Rivier Hall of Fame. We started doing a lot of that training way back then. And the reason that team was so great was because they were resilient and they had mental toughness that was just, it oozed out of them. And that's what separated them. They had the skill level, they had the conditioning, but the fact that they would walk in the gym and have that mental toughness, they put them over the top. And for me, mental training and mental toughness, it's all teachable. It's all about strategy. And not only that, if you learn, the great thing about student athletes is everything that you learn on the field or on the court is that you can now incorporate that into your life. And so for me, it's about strategies, routines, focus, and it's about being able to control your mind so that your body will follow. And your performance will elevate.
Now, just to learn a little bit more about it, where are you do this out of? Where are you located? Things like that. How does that all work?
So right now I'm all online. Mostly COVID has helped in that situation, but
Yeah.
it also, it makes that, we'll do a lot of one-on-one group, one-on-one single training, all through Zoom. So they basically get me as their coach. And, just like I said, they have a skill coach they'll do extra lessons with, and a physical trainer, they'll work their body. I'm working with them on their mindset and what it takes to be an elite athlete. We're working on the exact same routine, strategy, focuses that elite athletes do. We do group training as well over Zoom at this point. I do go in and help teams, or prior to COVID, I have gone to, in person, helping teams, training athletic departments. And, still the big thing I like to do is really get the one-on-one work, because it really allows me to have that relationship that I have with my current Rivier players. It really gets me to kind of dive in, understand what they're about, have that relationship with them, and then really get them to have that aha moment, a month or two down the road. And to see that happen is, again, why I do it.
Yeah, it's like connecting the dots. I mean, so you must have looked at it from hey, this is how I coach and train at baseline at the game of volleyball. When did you realize that you could maybe make this something a little bit bigger or expand just beyond the game of volleyball?
I've known for a few years that this is the route I wanted to go. I just had to figure out how to put it together. And so basically I was able to come up with a 5-step methodology, really, that will basically take you from beginning to end on how to handle your nerves, how to handle all those self-limiting beliefs, and see them coming, so that when they are coming, you handle them with ease. It's just a speed bump. You keep moving on to what your goals and what you're trying to accomplish. And a lot of it has to do, like I said, has to do with life. It's all going to come. So what I teach is, it allows student athletes to handle what's coming at them with the right routines and structures, no matter what they do in sports or in life. So I've been doing it for a while. I've been doing it with my teams for over a decade. But this is, I think I wanted to help more athletes. I think realizing that players were coming into my program and were behind mentally as far as that training, and if they had this training earlier, they probably would have had a more prominent role in my program come freshman and sophomore year. But now it's junior and senior year because they have to learn all the methodologies. So that's when I kind of wanted to jump in and help out other people outside of Rivier and realize that I can make a huge transformational empowerment to student athletes everywhere at whatever age they're at.
Yeah. I mean, it's awesome. I mean, in your record speaks for itself and your success speaks for itself. I mean, you obviously have put your players through this type of program for a very long time, and the results show just not at a local level, but also at a national level. And so if people were interested in this, how would they find you, locate you as far as email, social media, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, you can, for social media, you can go to Instagram. That's at Coach Craig Kolek. My Facebook page is CCK Mental Performance Training. My website is www.cckmental.com. Almost forgot that one there. And then
I've done it. I've been there plenty of times.
There's so many handles. And you can email me Craig at cckmental.com. And obviously my Rivier address out there is ckolek at rivier.edu. That's on our website, Rivier Athletics.
Right.
So
Yeah, we'll put everything on our social media for you, but this is great. I think this is like, it's that next step in really transforming athletes, from, again, like, yeah, when, I know in football, I try to prepare kids and, you talk about mental toughness and you try to put them in situations in practice, but, there really is a training outside of that. It's not just something that you can figure out in a few practices or in a few segments of practice that you can turn it on and off. It's something that really needs to be on all the time.
yeah, exactly. And when to prepare for it.
Yeah, exactly. COVID-19. So I'm just going to ask you this. I mean, obviously it disrupted everyone's seasons and the way that everything happens. For me as an educator, the one thing I really learned is a lot about how to teach differently, and how now to utilize a lot of the things and skills that I've been using in like a remote model and a hybrid model. And now when we're back in school full time, now I feel like I'm going to be a better teacher more than ever, that I can be more, technology when I need to, or more hands-on when I need to. Talk about maybe a transformation as a coach that you had during this COVID-19 time, or maybe something that you've changed about the way you coach, or just added an element to the way that you coach that maybe didn't exist before.
I think honestly for me, and I think I'm a little different than most coaches. I think when things go down not the way you plan it, I think most coaches go back to X's and O's. And okay, we didn't do this, so it must be X's and O's, X's and O's, X's and O's, X's and O's. I kind of took a step back and said, okay, how can I make my players better without overemphasizing the X's and O's? We know that needs to get better. What else can I do? And so we kind of did a lot more conversation about what players are thinking, what's going through their minds, what do they see. So I think for me, what COVID did was really kind of bring in even more compassion and empathy from my players to try to figure out what they're going through and what's the best route to help them. Because ultimately for me as a leader and for me to develop leaders, I mean, obviously you're still trying to build trust. That's the biggest thing as a leader. And then the second thing is you're trying to get your student athletes from A to B. And when you have something as massive as COVID, that's just kind of weighing on minds and affecting lives and families, you begin to realize X's and O's aren't the real problem. That's going to be there. But if you're able to understand where they're coming from, then they're going to put the effort in the right way for the X's and O's and how to develop their skills. So rather than just hammering home the physical part, it was, again, conversations, trying to figure out where they're coming from and trying to have some empathy about what they're going through. And then how can we get them from A to B in this?
Yeah. And like you said, you already kind of had a head start on that in a sense to be able to do that. And a lot of that mental training that you do, I'm sure you were able to easily do it or easily convert it over to more of an online, type standard where
Yeah.
you have it already. So that must have been huge for you. And obviously keeping your kids, that's what I always wonder in the college game, even more so in the high school game where kids are from everywhere. And, how do you really keep that connection with the team at all times? So that's awesome. You've had a lot of success in the coaching world, obviously. What's your advice to young coaches out there that are looking to get the start, maybe even the game of volleyball, but just in general of some things that you feel like they should know before making that jump to their next step or whatever their next step is?
I would give them the advice is learn to be the best leader they can be. If they, and kind of what I said, I really believe that leadership is about gaining trust and getting your players, your student athletes to A to B. If you can learn how to do that, if you can learn to, I call it Q leadership, compassion, understanding, empathy. If you can understand your players' viewpoints and where they stand with things and really gain their trust, then everything else in the court that is going to become easier for them. So you can always learn as a young coach, as an old coach, as any coach. There's always room to learn more and how to improve your players and how to improve yourself. So the more you go through it, the easier it is for you to teach it to them, to have them handle going through it.
Yeah, it makes great sense. It makes great sense. And I think for young coaches out there that are looking, the game's a grind and the game is
Yeah.
hard and you're working nonstop as an assistant. You're arguably working even harder because you're trying to prove yourself, learn as much as you possibly can, and obviously advance your career the best that you possibly can.
Yeah,
So
I
I
mean
mentioned that.
that's a good point. Not to interrupt you, but I
No,
mean
please.
the sacrifice issue is an issue.
Yeah.
Are you willing to sacrifice? And if you're not, if you're just in it because you just want to coach, but you're not willing to sacrifice certain things, you're not going to get to the level you want to get to, and you're not going to be effective. Um, these numbers and everything that you say about me, it's awesome, but I know what I sacrificed. I know what I went through, and to be that young coach, you need to do it. If you're looking to make a career out of this, and you're looking to be something that's going to be the next thing, you've got to understand what your why is. Why do you want to do it? And then the reasons need to outweigh all of the things that are going to slow you down. So it's the sacrifice for sure. Like, that's a good point.
Yeah, and you kind of alluded to my last point, but just jumping on the bandwagon of the sacrifice for a second. I mean, that's when I coached football for all those years. I mean, anybody who knew me that was close in my life, they knew that from August to Thanksgiving, you weren't really going to see me. And then when
Yeah.
I got to January, February, March, and going to clinics and Fridays or weekends, you really weren't going to see me. So sacrifice it's everything. So it makes me jump into the last thing that I really want to ask you is you mentioned sacrifice and we talked about it. I mean,
Yeah.
talk about the sacrifice you put in because, you've been doing it for so long. You coach two separate, collegiate sports in their different seasons, which means when one off season comes, especially from fall, you really maybe have a month before and not even, you're probably already mentally into the next season already of what you got to do and so on and so forth. And then that season ends in the spring, but then you got to recruit and then you got to be prepared for the fall and summer comes quicker than you think. And I mean, talk about the sacrifice that just comes into what you do and what you've put into the success that you have.
Yeah, I was, I guess, fortunate, if you want to say it this way. When I first started coaching, I did not have a girlfriend. I wasn't married, didn't have a girlfriend. So I just buried my head. I mean, got into the office at 8 a.m. and I left at 11 p.m., and I was constantly on the road. I was constantly traveling, constantly recruiting, constantly making phone calls and networking. And I mean, and this is before the internet. So this is, this is the telephone book. And so that was a big sacrifice to start. And, to get to the level that I was able to get to with my teams, it does affect you personally. You need to learn how to time manage. And I didn't do that great off the start. But once things kind of settled in, I go basically from late August through mid-November with my women's team. we get off the bus from either a loss or a championship win. And that's on a Saturday. And then Monday, I'm back in the gym with my men's team starting up their non-traditional season. And then, they go and through mid-April. And then all in between, it's recruiting because you're trying to keep up the standards that you have. And so now you're reaching out to whoever you can, probably not seeing as many people in person as you would want as a coach to see them live. So you're looking for video, you're looking for coaches' inputs for high schools and club coaches, and it's really a grind. And the summer, you say you're off, but you're not.
No.
You're still making calls, you're still talking to people, you're having recruits visit, because that the more they can visit over the summer, then the easier it is for you during your seasons when you're here. And you're still trying to handle the 40 student athletes that you're coaching, for 4 years each year. So it is a grind, and the sacrifices, you've got to figure out how to make it work. You've got to figure out how to make it work for all aspects. And that means you've got to take care of yourself first. If I don't take care of myself, it doesn't matter what I do at Rivier, because I'm not going to be available to help Rivier. So I've really got to be a little bit selfish and say, listen, I'm going to take some time off here. I'm going to take some time off there. I'm not going to go see this kid play, but I'll talk to him on the phone. And you just learn how to tinker a little bit with it, because what that means is you're able to go home and see your son at dinner time, or you're able to, bring your wife out to dinner on a Saturday night during a busy season where you're, like you said, you're you're at it for 4 months straight, and they don't even know what you look like. So it takes a toll. I've had those conversations. You feel like quitting, and I've had a great support system with my parents and my family, my brother and his family, my wife. If I didn't have them, I probably wouldn't be as far. I should also mention my boss. If I didn't have that group around me, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you. They saw what I was going through, but they also knew what I could do, and they kind of talk you off the ledge a little bit and help push you in the right direction and get you more into a powerful state where you're able to continue to push.
Yeah. And I think, when I thought of the idea of starting this podcast, a lot of the stuff that you just said, that you alluded to, is exactly why. Because, I think for all intents and purposes, a lot of people think coaching is just an in-season thing and that you do some work. And I stress some work outside of it, but it's really more than some. It's you arguably do more work in your off season than you do in season, because the in-season stuff's a lot easier in a sense. But it's a grind, it's a dedication, it's a sacrifice. I mean, it's all the above. And your loved ones are the ones who stick by your side, and they're there for you. And for everybody else, it's cool that they're person they know coaches at a college level, but they just don't understand the work and the pressures and all that goes into it. So
it's funny. I got a quick story for you. It's as an associate athletic director, obviously I'm involved with the whole department and hiring other coaches for other sports and things like that. And we get resumes in all the time, like, I want to be a basketball coach because I think at a college level would be a good retirement job, and you look at it and you go, what? Like,
that's wild.
Yeah, you have no idea what you're talking about. Like, this is way not a retirement job, and like you said, you hit on the nail. You have those people that understand it, and it's your inner circle usually, or coaches that are going through it, a little bit of a fraternity and sorority and a whole family group with all the coaches. And everybody else that doesn't go through it, they're like, well, what do you do all day? What are you doing? What are you really doing? You don't want to know.
Yeah, it's like, what do you think I'm doing? I mean, look at this, look at the programs that I have, and look at the competitive, rate that we play at. And yeah, absolutely. It blows my mind. It blows my mind. And that's why I love doing this podcast, because I do feel like, in a way, I do get to connect with a lot of different coaches, and I've learned a lot. I have notebooks full of notes of whenever I decide to coach, whether that's my own kids someday or down the road getting back into the high school game. I think there's a lot of great things that you need to do with your teams off the field and make your kids feel as though you're there for them at both levels, both, in the game, but also outside in their lives and what they're doing. And it seems like you do a tremendous job of balancing that. So I appreciate you coming on this podcast today. But before before we sign off, we have our famous 2-minute drill that we do with all our coaches here. It's just 2-minute, rapid
Yes.
fire
I've been
questions
waiting
at
for
you.
this.
So you know the drill. You've seen this before. Again, you do get a challenge flag if you want to explain something a little further.
All right.
Absolutely. Vice versa. I'll do the same thing if I want you to explain something a little further. Definitely. So we
Sweet.
get my timer set, and
Hit
here
me.
we go. Most rocking gymnasium you've ever played in?
Muldoon. That's the Rivier gym itself. It's low ceilings, 100 people in there sounds like 1,000, and it is awesome.
Okay, so I'll flip the question then. Give me an opponent's place that you hate going to and playing in a gym.
Johnson and Wales in Rhode Island. It's a big gym. It's completely opposite of what we have. They've got a raucous crowd from the city there, and they're a huge school with 10,000 kids. And it's every time we go down there, they know how good we are, and they know how much they want to beat us, and they pack the stands, and it's an awesome environment.
Yeah.
It's just it's nuts to have to coach against.
Oh, I love playing. Like, even if I was going into a tough visiting, I loved it. I loved it. There's just nothing like atmosphere, period.
Yep.
What was the hardest or the most difficult coach that you coached against in your career in either game, in either the men's or the women's?
Any of my alumni.
Okay. All right. That's a great answer. I've never had a coach say that before. That threw me off there.
Right.
Toughest school you played in league, you would say?
For the women would be Johnson and Wales. For the men, it would be Wentworth in Boston.
Okay. What is the biggest difference between coaching men and women's?
The women really are great at executing fundamentals. The men have tons of ego and want to beat their chests and skip the fundamentals.
Gotcha.
And try to get away with their athleticism.
Have you ever had a recruit in either the men or women's game that you were shocked that you landed?
Oh yeah.
Who would it be? Who would be the biggest one?
So Kenneth Finlayson on the women's side, definitely a Division II, possibly Division I type player for the women. Fortunately for me, quick story. Sorry. Fortunately for me, she was coached and clubbed by one of my alumni, so that kind of helped pave the way a little bit.
Yeah.
And then on the men's side, there's a lot. I'd say right off the gate, as far as being an impact freshman, I would go with Chris Markison, was out of California. Aaron Almario was another one that was. Chris started right away as a freshman. Aaron took a little bit to get going, but he was just a physical beast.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. Last question. Well, two-part question.
All right.
Give me one word that would describe your behavior on the sideline.
For me, I would say focused, and I'd say focused. If people were looking at me, they would ask if I'm sleeping.
Okay,
So,
I was gonna say, what do your players think? They think you're just like, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, you survived the 2-minute drill. We are good to go. And I want to thank you for coming on again today. Just a tremendous resume you've had. And just to listen to the way you do things. It's not just about the on-field product. It's just as importantly the off the court, I should say, product that you provide for your players, and through the physical grind of the game, but also the mental grind of the game. And I've had one of your alumni who I'm very close with. She had reached out to me a long time ago about you, and I always heard about her college volleyball coach. Oh, he was the best. And now that I met you and talked to you and researched you, yeah, man, you are. I mean, you really are. So thank you for coming on today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for the invite. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So from Beyond Podcast, I'm your host, Anthony Petralis, Craig Kolek, Rivier University. Until next time.